Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Breakout Session 11. I am Nishat Hussain, working as a Senior Research Associate at SANIM. Our chair was Dr. Imran Muddin, Executive Director, BIGD, but unfortunately, he is not physically sound now. So, on his behalf, I will be moderating this session. We have our discussant, Dr. Mugdho Mahja, postdoctoral fellow, Stanford Graduate School of Business, Stanford University, USA. He will be connected with us over Zoom. We have four paper presenters, and among them, three will be presenting online, and they are already connected with us over Zoom. And our only in-person presenter is Mr. Mustafizur Rahman. He's a research associate, Department of Economics, North South University, Dhaka. I am inviting him to take his seat. So we are starting our session. So we have four presenters, and each will be presenting for 10 minutes. So our first presenter is Dr. Binoy Goswami, Assistant Professor, South Asian University, New Delhi, India. Dr. Binoy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Okay, so you can start your presentation and please share your screen with us.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a minute to share the screen. All right, so thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I would like to thank Sanem first for giving this opportunity to share my work with you. And I would also like to apologize for my voice. I'm having a bad throat, so please bear with me. So the title of the paper is Productive. Can you just go back to the first slide? Uh, Investment on productive assets by Indian agricultural households, patterns, variations, and factors affecting investment decision. Next slide, please. So, productive assets are those that generate income over a period of time, and therefore it reflects the long-run economic status of an individual household or an individual. And it helps the richer households or a rich individual to expand production and also to generate more supplies, whereas for the poorer households or an individual, it works as an insurance. So ownership of or access to the productive assets determine the livelihood options and the probability of whether a household will be in poverty or out of poverty. So therefore, this analysis of the investment on productive assets serve as an independent assessment of the poverty status of a household. So that's the sort of purpose or significance of this work. Now, at the macro level, ownership and access to productive assets have serious implication for economic growth and eradication of poverty. Because positive impact of economic growth on poverty eradication gets diluted by the unequal distribution or unequal access to productive assets. Because if the productive distribution of productive assets is unequal or unequal, in that case, it pulls down the economic growth disproportionately. In the context of the agriculture sector, investment on productive assets by agricultural households is seen as crucial for economic growth, poverty eradication, and improved food and nutrition security of the households. Next slide. Now, when you look at the literature, one important issue concerning the productive asset is that of the role that various institutions, particularly the state and the markets, play in enabling households to access or own these assets. Now, there are two different kind of extreme versions of model that look at this issue. And the first one actually, one would refer to the Russian scholar Sayonev's model, where he looked into the joint production and consumption decision taken by households, and without access to any factor markets, and wherein the result is that, in absence of the factor markets and the poor households who do not inherit any productive assets, they are forced to self-exploit, and the return on, marginal return on their labor, that is wage that they earn, is very low. And therefore, there is a role for the state to play in terms of redistribution of productive assets. Whereas you have on the other extreme, the certain Walrasian models where the input markets are perfectly competitive, and therefore, with particularly the credit market, when it is perfectly competitive, market reforms that enables the households to utilize the services of these markets can deliver the same kind of results as the state intervention will deliver. But as we know, in the rural context, for most of the inputs, markets do not exist. Even if they exist, there are a lot of imperfection. Asymmetric information is one of the problems. So therefore, the dominant view is that you will need some sort of state interventions. The other issues that the literature looks at, with respect to the productive asset, is that of the gender distribution of ownership of productive assets. How women who usually, particularly in the South Asian context, who usually do not own the productive assets, how that hampers their agencies and women empowerment and so on and so forth. And then another strand of literature looks at the determinants of the household's decision to invest in productive asset, as well as the extent of investment. Now, in the Indian context, when we look at the literature, we come across certain studies, sorry, particularly the one that I have cited above, are in the Indian context. But none of these studies are comprehensive in nature. Particularly, most of the studies actually look at certain aspects of productive assets and on gross investment only, not on the net investment. But net investment is something that reflects the addition to the stock of the productive assets. So if at all, if something reflects a household's improved standard of living, that one should be looking at the net investment. So the next slide, please. This study, given this limitation of the existing literature, looks at both gross as well as net investment. So we estimate the magnitude of gross, replacement, and net investment across different items under two broad heading of farm and non-farm investment. Then we also look at the variation in investment on productive assets across states, Indian states, caste, land size classes, and gender of the head of the household. And then we finally identify the factors, structural and socioeconomic variables that affect the investment decision and the extent of investment by the household. Next slide. We use, nationally representative unit level data from the 77th round of a national sample survey. And for the first two objectives, that is to understand the magnitude of investment as well as variation, we estimate average monthly household expenditure on various asset types. And also, we look at these expenditures on the farm and non-farm assets across states, caste groups, social groups, and the gender of the household's head, and so on and so forth. And then finally, we estimate or identify the determinants of the household's investment decision and the extent of investment. Now, here we apply the Hackman two-stage estimation procedure because we assume that the investment decisions are taken sequentially. Because since I look at the net investment, we found, as you will see in the subsequent slides, that 75% of the households invested in terms of net investment, whereas 25% of the households' net investment was zero, which means not everybody invested or all households invested. So therefore, our assumption is that first a household will take the decision whether to invest or not, and subsequently, it will decide how much to invest. So therefore, we apply the Hackman two-stage estimation process in this case. Next slide. So here, as you can see, equation one is the selection equations, basically whether to invest or not, that equations, that decision. And the second one is the regression equations, which basically relates to the extent of investment. So for the first equation, we have a logit model because it's a binary, dependent variable is a binary variable, yes or no, whether invested or not. And the next one, the extent of investment, for that, we have a continuous variable, dependent variable. So we use ordinary least square. Next. So these are the variables that we have included in the regression models. They have been identified from the literature. So this basically includes farm-specific, household-specific, socioeconomic characteristics, farm and household-specific characteristics, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Okay, now I present my results. So if you look at in patterns of investment, as you can see, So here I have percentage of agricultural household that invest in non-productive assets. So you can see 98% of the household did some sort of investment, either net or replacement investment. So gross investment, in terms of gross investment, percentage of household that invested was 98%. But net investment is about 75% only. And in terms of proportion of household who invested on some item, the light machinery is the one, seems to be the popular one, where about 87% of the household invested, followed by 10% in, on irrigation machinery, and mainly farm investment only. Next slide. In terms of amount, as you can see, overall gross investment, if we see, it is INR 1452, which will translate into, because this data relates to 2018-19 data. So at that time of exchange rate, it will be like around $20. So it's a very small amount. And in terms of net investment, it is about like $16-17. So the amount invested on the productive asset is very, very small. Next. Now, these data might be, the numbers might be difficult for you to read. So, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. You have 1.5 minutes left.
Oh, okay. All right. So there is a huge variation in the investment. Next slide. In terms of, next slide is in terms of, size classes. As you can see, as the size class increases, it also increases, but there is huge difference. Next slide. We look at share of investment and share of a size class in the total investment and share of that size class in the sample. This basically says that, while marginal and small farmers, their share in the sample is high, but their share in the total investment is less, and opposite is the case for the large farmer. So this reflects the inequality in investment. Next one. In terms of occupational choice, farm investment, farm household invest lesser than non-farm and salaried households. Next. Male-headed household invest more compared to the female-headed households. Next. And SC/ST households, their investment on productive asset is less compared to OBC and other households, general category household. Next, please. This is the third part, the last part, factor affecting investment decision and extent of investment. These numbers might be difficult for you to read. So please go to the next slide where I have summarized the results. So investment decision can see education level of the head of the household, family size, farm size, income, membership of organized farmers organization, and have positive impact. SC and OBC households are more likely to invest relative to general category households, and casual labor households are more likely to invest in farm household. And the extent of investment, again, age and education level of the head of the household, proportion of net irrigated area, proportion of area under fruits and vegetable, family size, farm size, affiliation of farmers groups, access to crop and insurance, and crop insurance, formal credit, income have positive effect. ST household invest less, and SC households invest more relative to the general category household, and non-farm household invest more, and casual labor household invest less relative to farm household. Final slides, please.
Dr. Binoy, we have already exhausted the time. Can you please summarize your conclusion?
Yes, absolutely. Just give me half a second. So large proportion of households, sample household invested, about 98% on gross investment, 75% on net investment. Most of the household investing on light machinery, but amount is very, very less. There is substantial variation in average monthly gross expenditure on productive asset across states, land size classes, gender of the head of the household, occupational choice, and social group. Final slide. So key variables that significantly affect, I don't want to repeat it. I have already sort of explained that. So let it be. Just finally, the policy suggestion is that, since public investment and private investment are complementary, public investment crowds in private investment. So our suggestion is that public investment and complementary asset and infrastructure should be increased. Unfortunately, public investment in agriculture in India has been declining. Government has withdrawn, so it should be increased. And finally, access of the agricultural household to input market, such as insurance and credit, should improve, so that, because these factors have significant impact on the extent of investment or the decision to invest. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Binoy. So now I would like to request Ms. Vidya Rani K, PhD student, Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum, India, to present Doctor. Miss Vidyarani, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear.
Please share your screen so that you can start the presentation.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, ma'am. Can I start?
Sure, you can start. Just one thing, can you apply your presentation to full screen?
I think it is full screen.
It is? Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Uh, Good morning, everyone. My title of the paper is Decomposing the Caste Divide in Formal Credit for Unorganized Enterprises: Insights from Indian Enterprises Survey. So this is a collaborative work done by myself and my senior Mahesh Kumar, Center for Development Studies. So moving on to the outline of our presentation, we have introduction, research approach, results and discussions, and conclusion. So let me start with the motivation behind this research work. So in India, the unorganized sector consists of more than 99% of establishment, and it provides employment to 80% to the Indian economy. And considerable share of the socially and economically underprivileged sections of the people are engaged in the informal activities. But one of the major issue which still persists in the unorganized sector, especially in the case of unorganized enterprises, is they lack sufficient amount of formal credit. So lack of the sufficient availability of formal credit.
Uh, Miss Vidyarani, we can't hear you clearly, so give us some moments. না এটা ফুল দাও না ভলিউম ফুল দাও ভলিউম ফুল দাও এটা ভলিউম ফুল এই আউটপুটটা কোন সমস্যা হচ্ছে এটা না এটা তো একটু আগে করছিল না একটু দেখো Miss Vidyarani, sorry for the inconvenience. We have some
It's fine.
technical difficulties. Please
Okay.
give us some moments.
Okay.
Okay, I think now the things are okay. You can continue your presentation.
Okay, okay, ma'am. So, in the case of India, 97% of the non-farm unorganized enterprises continue to struggle with access to formal credit. So, when we look into the literatures which discusses about the access to formal credit, we can see a whole lot of literature which discusses about this access to formal credit, especially for the small enterprises. And when it comes to the how caste affiliation affects the credit access, this kind of study is relatively scant in the Indian context, especially in the case of the unorganized enterprises. But when it comes to the caste aspect, we can see whole lot of studies examine the how this caste affects the labor market outcome, and how it affects the earnings from self-employment, education, marriage. Like there are lots of studies which discusses about these kind of aspects. But how this credit affiliation of an entrepreneur affects access to credit for the unorganized enterprises is relatively less in the case of Indian context. So our primary aim of this research work is to examine the caste and credit relationship. Next, I'm moving on to the next slide. So we have based our research work into two theories. First one is the taste-based discrimination propounded by Becker, and the second one is statistical theory of discrimination by Phelps and Arrow. So the taste-based discrimination discusses that lenders may discriminate against minority borrowers regardless of their actual repayment capacity. And this statistical theory of discrimination discusses that lenders with less information, means imperfect information, may discriminate against certain caste group, races, and genders and assuming that they may possess higher risk. So, keeping this all in mind, our research questions mainly focuses on: do enterprises owned by marginalized group, especially SC/ST, OBCs, have less financing than forward caste owned enterprises? If so, are those differences explained by different firm level characteristics or others? And second one is: are financial lenders discriminating against enterprises owned by marginal group based on their caste affiliation? Has this caste discrimination grown or diminished over time? For this empirical work, we employed 67th and 73rd rounds of the All India Unincorporated Non-Agricultural Enterprises Survey conducted by NSSO. And for the empirical method, we employed probit regression analysis, OLS, and blind Rowasca decomposition method. So in the case of probit regression analysis, we are mainly focusing on the participation, which means that how this unorganized enterprises getting into the formal credit market. What are the determining factors affecting this for getting into the credit market? And the second one, even if they are getting into the formal credit market, they may not get equal, means fair amount of loan amount. For that, examining for that, we have employed the ordinary least square method. And additionally, in order to find out or decompose the credit gap between the different caste group, we employed the blind Rowasca decomposition method to decompose the mean differences in the log amounts of formal credit based on linear regression models in a counterfactual manner. But one of the major problem with the blind Rowasca decomposition method is that we are taking one group as a non-discriminatory category to compare with the other group. So, in order for an advancement of this method, Cotton, Newmark, and Oscar Ransom has developed a method where they are taking the averages of both categories as equal. So, in the case of blind Rowasca decomposition method, it gives us a three components like endowment, coefficient, and interaction effect. This endowment is mainly focused on the firm characteristics, and the coefficient is discusses about the discrimination or the unobserved factors. And this interaction mainly discusses about the simultaneous effects of both endowment and the coefficients. Results and discussion.
Is there any, sorry to interrupt, your 5 minutes left.
Okay. This is the summary statistics of my analysis. And when this diagram explains the mean amount of formal credit differences between the different caste group in different time periods, we can see that the average amount of formal credit increased with as the caste hierarchy increases. So the credit gap between enterprises owned by SC/ST, OBC, and FCs has widened over time. So the same results which I have just explained holds in this kernel density plot also. So moving on to the next slide, the credit taxes. Even after controlling the different fixed effects and other firm-specific characteristics, we can see that the enterprises owned by SC/STs, OBC caste group had a lower likelihood of accessing formal credit. And when it comes to the loan amount, here our dependent variable is the amount of formal credit. We can see that the enterprises owned by SC/ST, OBC caste groups had a lower loan amount compared to the enterprises owned by FC categories. And the next one is blind Rowasca decomposition, where we have taken FC as a non-discriminatory component and SC/ST and OBC as the comparing group. So the results here we can see that the credit gap has increased. See here, the credit gap for the SC/ST has increased from 0.976 log points to 1.450 in 2016. But one of the important thing is that the endowment component is larger than the coefficient for both SC/ST and OBCs in both time periods. But we cannot undermine the coefficient, which is the discriminatory part here, because the coefficient effects are still positive and significant, and they have increased over time for SC/STs and decreased for OBC categories. In the case of cotton, Newmark and Oscar ransom decomposition, this decomposition help us to decompose the unexplained component into cost of being SC/ST, OBC, and the benefit of being FC in the credit market. As we can see from this table that the proportion of FC treatment, which means that the benefit of being FC rose from 2.6% in 2011 to 3.64% in 2016. But on the other end, the cost of being SCs were about 9.61% in 2011, but it is still in 9.6% in 2016. And this shows that the SC/ST groups are the most disadvantaged in the formal credit market. And conclusion, in this paper, our main findings underscores a substantial credit discrepancy between forward cost and the other
Can you hear
marginalized.
me?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're 1 minute left. Thank you.
Okay. FC category, where we can see that OBC, SC/ST categories are more disadvantaged than the OBC category when compared to the forward cost. And so our decomposition analysis reveals that the explained component, which is greater than the unexplained component, and also we found a decreasing effect of discrimination, but it still remains a positive and significant, suggesting that disadvantaged caste group continue to experience discrimination in obtaining credit loan amounts in the formal credit market. So the findings of the study implied that the government support, which had a limited effect on marginalized entrepreneurs in obtaining formal credit in the case of Indian context. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Vidharani, for your presentation.
Okay.
Now we will go to our third presenter, Ms. Alex Zhu. Ms. Alex, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So you can. So let me introduce you. Ms. Alex Chu is a PhD student of Brown University, Rhode Island, USA. So Ms. Alex, you can start your presentation. Thanks.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. So thank you for inviting me. So today I'll present a paper co-authored with another Brown student, and the title is Impact of Intra-Household Information Asymmetry on Labor Productivity. So, sorry, let me try to go to the next. Okay, so income hiding from spouses has been highly prevalent around the world, and it's a practice as old as time. In economics, we often model marriage as this ultimate repeated game of producing and allocating resources. And in this game, hiding income or limiting the other agent's access to information is essential for the outcome. The existing literature has already looked at how hiding income or the information asymmetry affects the spouses allocating the existing resources within the household, but it has often overlooked the fact that these two agents are not just consumers of these resources, but they're also producers of them. So therefore, naturally, we wanted to ask the question, how does hiding income or how does information asymmetry affect one's labor supply decisions? And that's what the paper is trying to answer. In plain words, essentially, if I tell your husband and wife how much you make this month, would that affect your decision of labor supply this month? So this paper generally contributes to three strands of literature. One, we already talked about, it's information asymmetry within the household. We add to the literature by studying the labor supply decision. And second strand is the literature on the pressure to redistribute or family taxations. This paper is innovative is its focus on the pressure between households, which is arguably more consistent. And also it looks at how two genders react differently to the pressure to redistribute their income. Lastly, it adds to the overall labor productivity literature by looking at another avenue that could affect labor productivity outside the factory. So to study this, we essentially recruited 300 couples who are mainly garment workers from Cambodia. We and conduct a field in the lab experiment with them. For specific information about these people, so we recruited them because we believe they are a good representation of low-income workers in developing countries, and they also present signals that there is income hiding between them very often. The design of the experiment is pretty simple. Essentially, there's 2 rounds of randomization. In the first round, we would randomly select one gender of each couple to be assigned workers, which means they will be presented a standardized production task, and they will earn a piece rate wage based on the task figure, based on their performance in that task. And the second randomization is our real treatment, which means we will randomize half of the assigned worker to have their income disclosed to their spouse, and the other half will have their income fully private to themselves. The reason that we only assign one gender to be the assigned workers is because we wanted to isolate the mechanism to be purely about information rather than things like interspousal competition or one spouse deducting the other person's income based on his or her own work. And the information intervention, the treatment, the income disclosed kicks in before the standardized production task starts. So every assigned worker will go into their standardized production task knowing whether their spouse will or will not know about their income. And that's how we expect the treatment to affect the labor productivity. So a little bit more information about exactly what the production task is. We designed the task to be a very try to imitate an actual day at work in the factory. So it is the workers we asked to assemble a closing tag. You can see on the right, which is a very common task in the garment factory. We also designed the payment scheme to mimic a real wage system in a garment factory, which means they will earn a base wage, attendance wage for coming, and they will also earn an additional piece rate wage based on how much tags they're able to assemble in the experiment. So now we move on to the results.
Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, that's 5 minutes.
So you're 5 minutes left, yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. So we see actually very significant impact of these information disclosure on productivity, and we see that them very different by gender. So let's look at the women's first. So the female assigned workers, the blue and solid line is the productivity CDF of their productivity in our experiment session if their income is kept private to themselves, and the orange and dashed line is the productivity CDF if their income is being disclosed to their husband. So we can see that there is a drop of productivity if their income is being disclosed to their husband. And if we look at the regression closely, is a significant 8% decrease of their labor productivity. On the other hand, if we look at the male who are assigned as workers, they behave the opposite compared to their female counterpart. So they become actually about 16% more productive if their income is being disclosed to their wives. And naturally, the following question of this result is what is essentially causing the gender difference. We actually have written in the paper, we wrote a model and we done different rounds of heterogeneous analysis. But for here, I will just give you a snip of the results, given how much time we're given. So essentially in the model and in the heterogeneous analysis, we believe what is causing the gender difference are 2 factors. One is the bargaining power between spouses, and the second one is the cost of misreporting. So as we can see from the table that once we include these 2 factors, then the gender difference essentially becomes insignificant and much smaller on scale. So intuitively, what we believe is the case is that in our context, women have much lower bargaining power. They also have lower hiding cost, which makes it optimal for them to hide income from their husband when they can. And once we remove that information, we remove that information asymmetry, women essentially lost momentum to produce, because now their husband could can tax their income. On the other hand, men have much higher bargaining power, which means that they're not afraid of their wife taxing on them, even if their income become public. On the other hand, they also have this culture notion of being the breadwinner. Therefore, when their income is being revealed, they actually wanted to show off to their wife more to fit into the cultural norm as male breadwinners. Therefore, they become more productive. I wanted to sort of close the discussion by looking at what's the implication of the household welfare of revealing income in this situation where one can make labor supply decisions. So as we can see on the left, we plot a CDF of how these workers distribute experimental income to the vulnerable members of the household. So on the left, we can see women, when they're assigned workers, even though they make a little bit less compared to when their information is disclosed to their husband, they choose to give more to the more vulnerable members of the household. While on the other hand, if we look at the husbands, the men who are being chosen as assigned workers, even though when their information is public, they make more, they actually choose to allocate less towards the less vulnerable members of the household, but wanted to spend more on their own leisure goods, such as, I guess, cigarettes and alcohols due to our surveys. Lastly, is just some policy. We just conclude. Yeah.
You have 1 minute left.
Yeah. Lastly, we'll just conclude by potential policy implications this research will speak to. So one would be the financial inclusion policies. When people are being banked, obviously their income information may become more available to their spouse. That could inadvertently have some unintended consequences. Similarly, for labor productivity policies, this paper speaks to that there are avenues outside the factory floor that might be affecting the labor supply decisions. So that could be one thing to consider in these policies. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Alex, for your presentation. So our last presenter is Mr. Mustafizur Rahman, Research Associate, Department of Economics, North-South University. So he is in person. He is an in-person presenter. So I request Mr. Mustafizur Rahman to present his research work. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for presenting. I am thankful to Samim. My topic is, does the Fisher effect hold in South Asia? Actually, I am a research associate from North-South University, and my co-author is an assistant professor from North-South University. So, what is actually the Fisher effect? Fisher effect actually reflects the nominal interest rate and expected inflation. This is the relationship maintained by the Fisher effect. So if I explain more about this, suppose let's bank give you $100 loan, right? And $100 loan, when you repay that loan, bank set an interest rate with 10%, right? That is a nominal interest rate actually. So borrower pays back $110 to bank at the end of the year. Think that inflation here I in the determined it by inflation cost rises from $100 to $110, and then bank return will be zero, right? So bank has no return. And then what will happen? Bank a fall in corrupt is there. So if I continue, more generally, you see, Armin Fisher in 1930, he said this theory about the relationship between nominal interest rate is adjusted with the inflation. And that means nominal interest rate is equal to real interest rate plus inflation. Inflation reduces the real return on loan and potential losses of bank. And this exactly happened in the US in 1970. So there is bankrupt and liquidity crisis was there. The trend of lending rate from the bank in South Asia, if you see Bangladesh, this is the index calculated from SAEC and Haber Analytics of World Bank estimation, and Sri Lanka is more higher than other countries. This is based on 2022 data. Again, this is the inflation scenario in South Asia. If you see the inflation of goods in Bangladesh, I divided it into energy and food and other sector, right? So energy sector inflation is much more higher rather than food and other sector in Bangladesh. But in the case of India, you will see the food sector inflation is much more higher than energy sector and other goods. You see there is some percentile and other things. This is based on Have Analytics and based on the World Bank data calculation. So if I go to the literature review part, there are a lot of studies being done basis on the several countries, but not based on the South Asian perspective as a whole. So in my study area, I divided it into regional analysis of inflation rate and interest rate and monetary policy effectiveness of South Asian economies, inflation expectation of banking and household savings. So most important part is, most important findings is bank credibility is important, and central bank, if central bank can set the fiscal policy and other things, so this definitely grows smoothly. And if you government can set the inflation target, then financial sector will run smoothly. So need to target the inflation actually. So as I mentioned, that gap in the existing literature, there is no regional and comprehensive study. And integration of inflation and inflation targeting and inflation rate policy is not there. And if you okay.
You have 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Concerning loan and financial stability, this not directly hamper to inflation, but these have some impact I found about if you have non-performing loan and financial stability. So if you see the methodology I mentioned it earlier on, then I over time by fixing real interest rate and inflation, right? So if I go to the next slide, so this is our after modifying the methodology, just interest rate I is equal to beta R plus beta 1 inflation plus other things, the error term is there. So I want to replace it. If you can ask me how I can find the inflation target, then if I regress inflation in the dependent variable and interest rate in the independent variable, then there can be inflation rate targeting as well. So I take Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and all the South Asian countries. So if Fisher effect, that means if beta 1, the coefficient sign is equal to 1, then this is the exact Fisher effect is there. If less than 1, then this is weaker partial Fisher effect existing there. So I calculated the data from International Monetary Fund. The expected inflation is calculated based on consumer price index. Latest CPI minus initial CPI divided by initial CPI into 100. And this way I calculated the inflation and nominal interest rate is there. So this is the summary statistics. This is the balance summary statistics as I mentioned. And I tested augmented decay Fuller test to check whether there is any serial correlation or not. And if you see I checked the unit to test as this is the methodology. The difference between stationary inflation rate, there's a period-to-period change. Actually, long-time period change is there. If ARDL bound test, this is lower than 1, and inflation targeting. In case of error correction model, this is the final calculation and the result part actually. If you see the insignificance of the short-term coefficient inflation, near significance of these suggests that inflation may not have an intermediate effect on interest rate within the same month. But there is a mechanism that gradually adjusts in interest rate to maintain equilibrium relationship with over time. That means there is a relationship in the long run, but there is no short-term relationship. And I know, yeah, 0.54% is equilibrium correctly. So in the last part, policy suggestion and conclusion, need to. I know there is a bank interest rate to pay to the deposit not growing up much, and this is not exactly the reflect of monetary policy. So need to strengthen the monetary policy. Moreover, inflation targeting I mentioned is not obviously in the short term. This is exactly based on long term. We know the monetary policy in South Asia interest rate don't match up with the inflation rate at all. And so if you set a target combined inflation rate and combined inflation and interest rate policy, there could be effective. Exactly, I mentioned that bad loans and other non-performing loans need to address. Moreover, there is regional comprehensive South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, SAEC. This can be like to ensure effective monetary policy to help a stable and growing economy. And set up the monetary policy as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mukhtar Rahman, to complete his presentation within time. So now we will be going to our discussant. I have said earlier that we have our discussant, Dr. Mugdho Wahda, postdoctoral fellow, Stanford Graduate School of Business, Stanford University, USA. So, Dr. Mugdho, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me, Ishan?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. So, you can start discussing the papers.
Thank you, Ishad. Just remind me, how many minutes do I have?
So you have 15 minutes time.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right. Let me start by thanking Sanem for giving me the opportunity to read these four wonderful papers. As it's extremely difficult to do justice discussing four full papers within a short period of time, but I'll try to give my comments on each of the paper. I have divided it in a couple of slides for each paper. So first, I'll try to summarize the paper with few bullet points for the audience who is listening, who is attending this session, and then I will have some specific comments. And I'm sorry to be brief. Given the time constraint, I'll just touch upon the points that I thought could be important for the authors to ponder. All right, so I will start with the first paper, the first presentation. So the title was Investment on Production. This is based on Indian agricultural households. So just again, to recap the paper in a few bullet points, the authors have shown there are three kinds of productive investment they have identified, and they have divided it into gross investment, net investment, and replacement investment, and they have focused on net investment as that is adding to the current stock of agricultural asset. And they have found that 75% of the households are doing net investment, whereas 25% of the agricultural households are not making any net investment. They have carefully used the national sample survey, and that survey is focused on agricultural households. And they have this measure of investment in productive assets, and they have used that to show the difference in terms of investment in productive assets. So this is a nice descriptive paper showing variation among household investment in productive asset in India, and they have divided it in terms of states, in terms of different structure of the households, and they have shown that there is actually differences in terms of investment in productive assets in India. So my specific comments on this paper. So it looks like it's an ongoing paper, and there is room to do some development of this paper till it is ready for publication in a good journal. So the authors have used a Heckman correction model, and it is very important whenever your authors are using a model, specifically Heckman model, they have to talk about the selection issue. As we know that Heckman model is used when there is a selection problem while trying to identify the causal effect of any kind of intervention or program. So it is not very clear from the paper why this Heckman model is used, or what is the story behind this selection that might be problematic to do a causal estimation of this particular research question. So I would request the author to spend a bit more time and come up with some stories why Heckman model is suitable to do identification and the causal effect estimation using Heckman over here, because we know there is a very clear selection story going on over here, but it needs to be spelled out on the paper. Second is that, as we know right now with the development of modern econometrics, Heckman models it's a bit risky to use it in many papers. So number one, that is very hard to find a valid instrument, right? The instrument has to be like having an effect on the outcome variable, but not having any relation with the error term. So it's very hard. But in this particular case, I think the instrument is not bad. So it could be used over here. Then there is another strong assumption that we know for Heckman correction model, that this two stages. So we have two stage regressions where we have to assume that correlation between these errors of these two equations are linear. So we are letting go all kind of possibility of nonlinear relationship among variables in such models. So that's a big kind of assumption that we have to make. So we have to be a bit clear, or at least we have to come up with some stories that say that this kind of assumptions are valid in this particular setting. Third point is that so I was a bit confused because there was not any mention of this IMR. So this ratio that is calculated from the first stage of the regression. So the author provide the probit and the OLS model. However, as we know, for a Heckman correction model, you have to come up with this IMR, this particular ratio that actually captures the selection story, the selection in the first model that you could apply in the second regression. I was surprised to see it is in the paper. It's absolutely not mentioned. So I'm a bit confused how this model, how actually this Heckman two-stage regression have been done without having this ratio that has been captured in the first stage, and then you can apply that in the OLS regression. So this is very important. So without this, I'm not sure that this Heckman model is applicable over here. So I would like to suggest the author to spend time on this and clarify this point. And the fourth point is, as you can see in this kind of research, there are many variables which are potentially important to explain this investment on productive asset, right? So, and then there is some literature you can search, you can come up with some variables that is related to this, and you can use those in a OLS setting or in a regression. However, nowadays you can use this lasso selection model. Is a very straightforward way. When you have a large number of variables, you can use this model to predict which are the variables you can keep on your regression, and that gives a more kind of econometric sound sense to use those variables rather than randomly using a vast number of variables. At the end, I would say this is a very nice descriptive paper, but I would be a bit careful to make causal claims. As I have stated, using Heckman correction and using it correctly is a bit tough. So I would rather say this paper shows the correlation of many factors that is having an impact on the decision of making investment on productive asset, but we have to be careful before claiming these results are causal. All right, so that was the first paper, and sorry, for me, the second paper over here that I have reviewed is the last paper that was presented. So I will go straight into that. So just again just to do a review for everyone. So the authors have tried to see whether Fisher effect holds in case of South Asia or not. And as you know, and the authors have done a good job in showing what is Fisher effect. Just to recapture that, Fisher effect assert that real interest rate, which adjusts for inflation, is equal to the nominal interest rate, the observed interest rate, minus the expected inflation rate. So that is the relation, and it's a good old 100 years old theory. It's a very old theory that it has been tried to see in the US and Europe, whether Fisher effect hold in different time of history. And the authors find partial Fisher effect for South Asian economy from 2013 to 23, and they have used augmented the ARDL approach. Overall, one of the key findings of the paper is that interest rate is non-stationary at level and stationary with first difference, and inflation rate is stationary at level and with first difference. So that is what the data is suggesting, and this could have a potential policy implication as well. So my overall, this paper also looks like it's a work in progress. It's still not ready for going to a journal or a publication. So there is a lot the authors could do. Few specific questions like why the authors have used this 2013 to 23 time period, right? What is special about it? Why this 10 years? because you can choose, like, there is no limitation of using the years within your model, and this data is available actually. So I'm not sure why this 10 years period was taken and what is so special about it. So the authors need to write about it in the paper. Second, and which is more important point, why we're trying to see the South Asian economies in an aggregate manner. What is the charm in it? Why what is we know that we are still not in a custom union where the monetary policy of each country is dependent on the other country, or it has an effect on other country. So I'm not very sure why using Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal together to do the analysis is important. Is it like for the data issue, or so I'm not very clear. So doing it individually would actually give some clear kind of policy implication or clear messages what's going on, but aggregated them together, all these 5 countries. I'm still not sure if that's a very good idea or what is the exact reason behind it. So I need to see more discussion on that in the paper. And this is a very straightforward. The last point is that as we know that many other authors have done some work on empirically estimating the future effect, but what is the spatial or like exact contribution of this paper, that is not very clear. So I would again request the authors to come up with a clear contribution that this paper is making, and I think this will come up on discussion about why you are aggregating all the South Asian economies to see the future effect. All right. Moving on to the third paper. So author, this paper, it's based on Cambodia, and they have done a lab in the field experiment on 287 Cambodian couples working on garments industry. And so they basically in this particular experiment, it's a lab in the field experiment, they disclose income between spouses, and they show that it reduces wife's productivity but increases husband's. It's a very nicely done experiment. I really like the way the experiment was conducted. It's very clean. It's clear to understand what's going on, and it answers a very important question that we right now that we need to answer in terms of intra-household bargaining power, especially the gender gap, gender divide between this particular aspect. So, and then they move on after the experiment. So they try to answer this mechanism or the results of the experiments by coming up with a model. It's a very cleanly written model. I really liked reading the model. And overall, this model suggests a few points. I'll just reiterate that. Alex has already talked about it, but I'll just reiterate for the audience to understand what's going on in the paper. So women over here in the model have lower bargaining power, hiding costs, and lower benefits of reporting income. With hidden income, the women are underreporting. So women reduce their output when the income is disclosed to their husband, basically. So that's why like they have their incentive is driving them to reduce their output or productivity when income is reported to their husbands. The story is exactly opposite for the husbands. So the men have a higher bargaining power. They over-report their income, especially when it is hidden. So they increase their output when income is disclosed to their wives. It's a very nice story, story that is coming from the model, and that is supported by the data. I mean, overall, it's a wonderful paper. I really enjoyed reading it, and I was just going to suggest the author that one of our PhD candidate who graduated last year, I think she's doing a postdoc at Princeton right now, Sally. Sally's paper was similar to this one, but then I saw that the authors have cited Sally as well. So this is a wonderful paper. I'm guessing it's a job market paper, and it's a very well written. It's very well done, and overall, there is not many comments I could come up for this paper. However, some points I just like to discuss for the authors to ponder. So is there a way to influence behavior so that women output could increase? Another experiment. So what I'm trying to say over here, so we know that now that this is the outcome, this is what's happening in the household. Now, is there a way if we provide this information that, look, this is what is happening, this is how women are reducing their productivity if the income is reported, given this information, whether it could change the behavior of the woman or whether it could reduce the already negative effect that we are getting. I know it is very hard to do in this particular paper, but maybe that could be a follow-up experiment or a follow-up paper that could show that providing information about this incidence actually could have a maybe positive impact on human behavior. That I thought could be a wonderful research to continue from there. Also, similarly, can a parameter added to the model that could show that providing such information could increase reporting and productivity? Yeah. So we don't need to do the experiment, but is there a way within the model to show that if this kind of information is received by women and men, whether actually their behavior changes, and that could have a potential positive impact on the productivity? So that could be very interesting, and that could have a very important policy implication as well. Third is that, is there any level effect? So I was not very sure about whether there is a degree of bargaining power. One, we understand that a woman has a less bargaining power and a man have more bargaining power. But I was just wondering if there is a degree, and if there is a degree, whether there is a effect, there is a level effect. It's not, I was wondering if it's not only like a binary 0 or 1, but if there is a level of bargaining power, and the results could be explained, the variation could be explained with the level. Something maybe I have missed in the paper. It is already there, but I thought that would be interesting to see. And the last point is that, does the result change with family structure, location, joint versus unit family? So let's suppose in a family there are there are like 70% children are women and 30% men. Or there could be like they're living in a family with their parents. So this kind of a specific family structure and maybe some geographic location that has a different culture within Cambodia, whether that has any impact. So it's more like kind of a heterogeneity test that could show us there might be some other factors within the family structure that could also potentially explain some of the variations. Overall, great paper. Enjoyed reading it. Thank you. All right. Moving on, the last paper that I will discuss. This is yeah. So this is decomposing the credit market for our unorganized enterprises in India, specifically focusing on caste divide. So the authors use non-degree surveys of 2011 and 16 in India to show caste-based discrimination in formal credit access. Extremely important question, and it's a very, I would say, sensitive issue and important issue with a lot of political economy aspect as well. And the authors have found, using this data, that there is discrepancy in accessing formal credit between FC forward caste and SC, STs, and OBCs as well. So for the authors, so for the audience, the SC, ST, and OBC are the backward caste in the definition of the caste system. So authors have used Probit and OLS regression, and they show that both access and the credit amount are lower for STSCs and OBCs compared to the forward caste. And they have
Can you hear me? Yeah, so we are running out of time. Can you complete your discussion with?
Sorry, Shad, I couldn't hear you.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear. I need a couple more minutes, 2 minutes.
Please complete your discussion within 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds good. Thank you. So, and then they have done used blinder Oaxaca decomposition to show some presence of discrimination. The version of the paper I got, I think that was the initial version. Today in the presentation, I saw that the authors have actually done a bit more than blinder Oaxaca decomposition, which is good to see, to seek the discrimination. So overall over here, I think one particular point which is very important, the Probit model in the paper, if you see table 3, column 6, where you have the authors have control for all the independent variables, the statistical the impact on SCHTs for credit access is statistically insignificant. So I would be a bit more careful saying that credit access is bad for SCHTs or lower for SCHTs compared to FCs, because that particular regression, which is the important one, actually shows statistically insignificant effect. So just like I saw that authors have drawn conclusion saying that it actually has less access, credit access, but that might not be correct given that result of the regression. However, the results are pronounced for OBCs. They actually have less credit access, and also in terms of the credit amount is less compared to forward cast. Third thing is the economic interpretation of this coefficients is missing. So you give up the coefficient number, then there is no actually economic interpretation, how big it is compared to FCs. Is it like, is there a percentage interpretation? So that was not very clear. So I would suggest to write some clear economic interpretation of the coefficient that would be easier for the reader to understand the gravity of the situation. And then at the end, just we need to be a bit careful using a blinder Oaxaca decomposition, because you see the unexplained component that the authors are trying to say, which is discrimination, that also could come due to endogeneity problem, right? There could be some important variables that are missing in the model that could actually come up for the unexplained part. So we have to be a bit careful about that. Then again, there are some assumptions that linearity and additivity and assumption, we are actually adding up two decomposed factors. So that is another very strong assumption. Third is choice of the reference group. Over here, the authors have chosen forward cast as the reference group, but they should also show that if they change the reference group, the results are similar. Yeah, I think overall, that's it from me. I'm happy to discuss anything or get any feedback from the authors or yeah. Thank you, Shad. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Muthu, for your comprehensive discussion on the papers that have been presented. So now I think, is there any, we can go to for the open discussion. Is there any question from the audience? Yes.
Mark from of Economics, University of. I have two questions to Mr. Brahma. Did you consider the potential impact of external economic Asia? And my question is, research compare different policy frameworks banks, South Asian countries? How might these variations
So, any other question? What is having? I was getting your student. University. So, I have two questions.
did you select the South Asian countries for your analysis and what criteria did you use? And how the results of the study contribute to the existing body of knowledge on monetary policy, economic dynamics, South Asian region? Practical standpoint, what implications do findings have for monetary authorities and investors operating in South Asia? And will the policies be for countries or codependent? What's your take on that?
Thank you for your question. Any other question? Okay, I think that's it. We do not have any more questions. So now I will go back to the presenters, and each presenter will be responding for 2 minutes to the discussion or the questions the audience has presented. So I am starting with Dr. Binoy Goswami.
Okay. So I think I did not have any question from the audience, but from the discussion. First of all, I would like to thank the discussion for the very valuable and important comments on the paper. And I'm really thankful to you for those comments. Yeah, as you said, this is a work in progress, paper. So I have to work a lot on that. And all those points that you have raised are very valid. Yes, there is why the hacking model, because there is a selection bias issue, because in the data itself, only those households who are income is 4,000 in INR. So that is reported. So there is that story is there. So as you said, I have to sort of bring in that selection bias issue. So I'll do that in the next version of the paper. But thank you very much for that comments. And for the other ones, yes, of course, the nonlinear relationship and identifying the important variables rather than using all of them. Those are very important comments. We'll do that, all of them. And the IMR, yes, that was a mistake on my part. I failed to report that, and though it was there, but I focused mainly on the variables that I selected. But of course, in the next version, I'm going to report that as well. And yes, for the is interpretation of the coefficients as the causal rather than the causal relations, but the association need to be careful in the interpretation of the coefficients. All of them are very, very valid points. So I'm very thankful to you for all those comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Binoy. Now, Ms. Itarani, please respond to the discussion of
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my paper here. And I got very wonderful comments for this, for the further improvement of this paper. Yes, I understood that endogeneity problem is still there in our paper that I need to take care of. Then I will do it that. Then one more thing, this economic interpretation of this coefficient also, I need to take care of that, that I will do it. And thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for this comments also.
Thank you, Ms. Itarani. So now, Ms. Alice Zhu, please respond.
Yeah, so thank you for the discussion. I think, yeah, thank you for the wonderful comments. Yeah, I think you probably said before I think in the paper there was a bargaining power that we evaluated as the continuous variable through some vignette questions. So that would help us essentially understand just sort of, in a continuous sense, how does bargaining power affect the labor productivity decisions. On the other hand, yeah, I think your suggestion is great. It could be very interesting to understand how does, if there's any ways for women to also have their output increase in response to some information treatment. Yeah, so thanks for that. I think I got a question from the audience, but I couldn't really hear it very clearly. So is there any way to kind of yeah.
I think from the audience there is no questions.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alex. Now we will go to the last presenter, Mr. Mustafa, to respond.
Thank you. First of all, I want to discuss about Mugdobai's question. So you asked me why 2023, 2013 to 2023, right? So to make, I want to make that in unique data set of commodity price index and interest rate, as I use IMF data base. So countries' data are not available in that data set. So some countries actually before 2013. So I consider that. And why emerging economy? Why I select South Asian economy? So as you know, this is a working paper. So I will check whether fixed effect is there or not. If I check the fixed effect, then I can suggest a specific or individual monetary policy to a specific country. And you know, there is some proposal like new development bank, like BRICS. You know, there is a consideration of emerging economy and consideration of emerged monetary policy. So I want to start from the South Asian economy. If I can set a rule about combined monetary policy, then it can be set for BRICS and other emerging economies as well. I don't know whether I can or not. Again, I will check the fixed effect and we want to see, we are talking about inflation rate targeting, right? About the central bank policy and inflation rate targeting. So we are replacing inflation on interest rate. Now, if we replace interest rate on inflation, that could be a possible idea to check whether it is hold or not. That is the issue. Again, about the first participants question, whether I introduce shock or not. You know, again, I am talking about this is my working paper. So I will introduce COVID shock, COVID mortality, COVID cases, COVID dummies as well. And I want to introduce Russia-Ukraine war dummy, Russia-Ukraine war casualty, and you know there is a policy related to U.S. interest rate as well. So if U.S. rise or lower the interest rate in their central policy, these might impact on the South Asian economy. So I will try to address that. And again, in the second participant question, why is South Asian country selection? How I can select South Asian country based on SAEC, South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation. Based on this, as I mentioned, BRICS and other things are there. But the inactiveness of South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, they can implement, they can work for monetary policy as well. And what combined policy, I will set the fixed effect, and combined policy can be emerging economies and other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mustafizur Ahmad. We have already reached to the end of this session. I'd like to thank all the presenters and the discussant and the audience for their active participation. We had some excellent papers and a very comprehensive discussion. Thank you all for participation. We are signing off from this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.